Greetings. I very much regret not being able to be with you. I know you're meeting in Jakarta, and it's very close to a country that is dear to my heart. In fact, indulgently, let me say hello to my Australian comrades. They will know that I would very much like to be there. It is a very bleak time for the workers of the world. We are in the second wave of the global financial crisis. It's now a bitter crisis of unemployment, the highest number of unemployed on record, on the official books. Many, many millions more trapped in the informal economy that's growing in every country. And for young people, it's a social and economic tragedy. 45 million young people entering the labour market every year to economies that simply can't accommodate them. This has to be turned around. We also know, of course, that this lies at the feet of inaction, because the second issue is that the financial markets are back in control. You remember the government's calls at the height of the crisis. They said never again would the financial sector be in control of the real economy. Well, they've failed. Financial regulation is simply not there. They're even still lacking the courage to put a financial transactions tax in place, a small amount of money on financial transactions that would raise much needed revenue to invest in jobs, to actually look to solidarity with the most vulnerable nations. We need to make sure that the future is shaped by the power of workers and their advocacy around jobs, jobs and jobs and rights. But I must tell you that in this second wave of the crisis, workers are now the deliberate victims of government policy. In the first wave, they were incidental victims. They lost their jobs, they lost their pension value. Now, however, multilateral institutions, the other global actors, the American Chamber of Commerce, everywhere throughout the world, virtually, it seems, demanding that workers' rights be attacked. Government legislation, certainly put together by national actors, but with global actors driving the agenda. Our enemies determining that freedom of association, collective bargaining rights, that these things are no longer fundamental rights, that they can be constrained in the interests of some better future. Well, if you think that austerity, that cutting jobs, that cutting wages, that taking away collective bargaining rights to distribute wealth more evenly, if you think these things, that to shrink is to grow is an oxymoron, you'd be right. And yet that's the old orthodoxy, the old neoliberal economic thinking that is now back at the heart of these demands. So as you meet, we will be meeting here in Brussels with a Frontlines forum that says there are new front lines in the attacks on labour rights, and we must push back, we must fight back. We cannot see country after country now facing national struggles against demands for reducing labour rights without a global response. For those of you who know how long it took us in Australia, 3 years, to shift a government, to build back fundamental guarantees, and even now there's unfinished business. But I can tell you that if we don't stand now and fight back for labour rights, then not only will we not see demand stabilised, not only will we not see secure jobs and secure incomes, but we will see for years to come a bleak picture for ourselves and our families. We will fight, but we need to also organise, because organising members of unions, the strength of unions, and then organising a political voice for working people is what will make the difference. So a line in the sand. We will go from the new Frontlines forum with a global inquiry where we know that the global union federations will join us. Let me say to you, we're also in the middle, of course, of COP17, and you have had strong debates around the question of climate action, but you have many leaders amongst you who know that we must move to a green economy if we're to hand on a planet to our children and grandchildren on which they can survive. You also know that manufacturing has a strong future if we get the policies right. We know that in the research we're doing as we mobilise from Durban to Rio +20, that in just 12 countries, if we had 2% of investment in the green economy, in traditional sectors like construction, manufacturing, transport, services, agriculture, telecommunications, these areas, we could generate 55 million jobs. 2% times 5, we can generate 55 million jobs in just 12 countries. That's worth having. We know you'll be there to support us in our demands for Rio. Green jobs, jobs, jobs and jobs. Social protection, the social protection floor, which guarantees everybody the dignity of pensions, unemployment benefits, child protection, education for all, health, and of course housing and sanitation. The world's now committed to this. We have to force the issue of funding, raise unorthodox global funds to actually tackle these questions. But let me just go to one area, because you know that the ITUC is now working with global unions federations on indeed corporate campaigning. Just as we need to bring governments to account, we need to make sure that the corporations can't continue to simply ignore workers' rights, whether it's directly or in their supply chains. And indeed, we have been working with Uni on Deutsche Telekom. We are now in partnership with the ITF and indeed with Uni in the campaign, the global campaign around DHL. We are talking to the BWI around IKEA, and we want to work with the IMF. Jyrki and I have had several discussions on priorities that you determine. We'll continue those discussions after your meeting, and in the context, of course, of what is an exciting venture where you are merging 3 global union federations to create a much stronger base for the global unions movement. And we are indeed very grateful, and I know that you'll be very proud of the new organisation you will create. If you take just one area that is worrying us enormously, the world refuses to see the appalling violence against women in the Congo. Every company that benefits from the mining of rare earth minerals into the manufacturing of telecommunications tools, many companies that you work with, they all have a responsibility to see that the source of those rare earth minerals is not used indeed to finance the paramilitaries, the militaries, the violence that is unspeakable against women in both their workplaces and indeed in their communities. This civil war has actually seen more than 5 million people lose their lives. It's the biggest tragedy since World War II, and the corporations turn a blind eye. So in terms of the manufacturing area, we certainly want to work with you to see what we can do to clean up that very, very dirty supply chain, probably the dirtiest in the world. There's much to talk about. For the ITUC, organising remains at the core. Corporate organising, political organising, informal economy, trying to formalise the economy with social protection and a minimum wage, but organising around that. Young people, particularly women, supporting new and emerging federations in North Africa, those incredibly courageous revolutions we saw there. But indeed, those countries now fighting either to finish the end to dictatorship or indeed to build new, free, independent unions. There's a lot to do in this world. It is bleak, but also that's why we exist, to support working families, to represent workers, to fight for rights, and to shape the policies that will drive a much fairer globalisation. I congratulate you on all of the things that you do every day, and I look forward to working with you even more closely. I will indeed certainly read and discuss the deliberations and the outcomes of this Central Committee. Solidarity.